Welcome to another instruction video in Synology Studio BEA5. Today I'm going to demonstrate the technique of vocoding, not with a vocoder, but I'm going to build a vocoder with equipment that is available in this studio. The central piece of equipment that I'm going to use for this demonstration is the Bruel Kjaer third-octave filter in the version that has the modified interface, as I have been demonstrating in one of the previous instruction videos here. So if you don't know how that piece of equipment works, then please have a look at the instruction video about the filters. So in that demonstration I used the filter to filter noise and to select a certain part of the whole frequency range and only let that part appear at the output of the filter. Now I'm going to use the filter to analyze the sound first. So what does that mean? If I have the full bandwidth between 20 Hertz and 20 kilohertz, if I then take a filter that does this, that means that if I have a very broad sound that goes into the filter, only this part will appear at the output. The other way around, if I have a very narrow sound, for instance a sine wave that is outside the frequency range of this bandpass, then that sine wave will not appear at the output of the filter at all. If I have a sound that has multiple frequencies and I have multiple filters with individual outputs, I can look at the output of the filters and then compare the levels, and I can say something about the frequency content of the sound that I'm sending into that filter. So when I take a pin and I place that pin at the line of direct output number 2 at 800 Hertz, I hear a bandpass, a very narrow bandpass of 800 Hertz that is taken away from the broadband pink noise that I'm sending to the filter. So the pin is still there, but I have taken away the pink noise and I have replaced it with a sine wave coming from one of the function generators. And when I'm making a sweep with that sine wave, there will be a moment where it appears and where it disappears again. So when the frequency of the sine wave matches the bandpass frequency that I have selected here, the sound will appear and then it will disappear again. There it comes. And there it goes again. What I have done now is that I have made 6 groups of 1 octave bandwidth each. So 3 third of an octave band passes next to one another. The first group starts at 160 Hertz and it goes to output number 1. The second one starts at 315 Hertz, goes to output number 2. The third one starts at 630 Hertz, goes to the next output, and so on until I am at the highest frequency, which in this case is 8 kilohertz. And when I'm connecting a pink noise to the output, to the input now, I will have the following. On the patch bay we now have the pink noise going into the filter, and then from the 6 outputs of the filter we go to 6 inputs of the mixing desk. So this is the first output, the lowest octave, the next one, the third one, fourth one, fifth one, sixth one. Now I have also sent the outputs of these 6 faders to the 6 group faders 1 until 6 here, and therefore I can also see their levels on the 6 VU meters on the meter bridge. And when I'm now going to make a sweep again with a sine wave, you will see that one of those VU meters gives a response depending on the frequency that I am sending to the filter. So I start with the lowest There it is. So now the frequency that I have on the sine wave generator matches the range of that filter output. And when I go up, 1 disappears, 2 comes up, 3 comes up, 4 comes up, 5 and 6. So that's with a sine wave. Now imagine that I take a voice, and I'm not going to tell you yet what that voice is, but I'm just going to play a voice into the filter. So I'm going to play that voice that I have recorded in Pro Tools into the filter, and we are seeing, but we are not hearing anything at the moment, we are just seeing the response of the 6 VU meters which are connected each to one of the filter group outputs. And it's very clear that they do not have an equal response. So this means that I am actually seeing now the spectral content of this voice, where the most energy is in the middle frequencies, so at VU meter number 4 now. Sometimes when there is an S or a T, I will suddenly see VU meter 6 giving a response because that is connected to the highest frequencies, and so on. Okay, and now with the voice.
And there's only so many guns I can clean before that gets bored. So, I'll get to go through my safe, which will be fun. Do a little 2A stuff. But in the meantime, I look forward to your recommendations.
In the example that I just showed, we had the outputs of the filters going to the VU meters on the mixing desk. Now, instead of monitoring the level at a certain filter output with a VU meter, I can also send that output to a device that is called an amplitude demodulator, AMD, which is sometimes also called an envelope follower. And what that amplitude demodulator does is that it translates the audio level at the input into a voltage at the output. So when this level here is high, it means that I will approach here a voltage level of around 5 volts. And when there is no sound here, the voltage level at the output of the demodulator will be 0 volts. So if I have a whole bank of demodulators like this, and they each have a specific filter range connected to their inputs, then at the outputs I will have a voltage level, for instance like this, which is equal to the frequency content of the sound that I'm sending to the inputs of the filter. So I'm going to use a lot of space for my third octave filter now, and that is because I need to make many connections to it. So here are my 6 amplitude demodulators. And these are the 6 outputs of the third octave filter, and the voice goes inside. And now I'm going to take 6 amplitude modulators, And the voltages from the demodulators are going to control the amplitudes of the amplitude modulators. And they go to faders. Now I don't have a second third octave filter, but I'm going to do as if I have one. So I will draw that second filter here. So let's assume that the filter frequencies that I have here are identical to the filter frequencies that I have there. So what does that mean? It means that when there is energy in these frequency bands that I have here on the output of number 1, I will get a voltage on the output of the demodulator, which will open the amplitude modulator number 1 and we will pass the output of the second third octave filter in the same frequency range to this fader, and so on. So that then leaves the question, what is the sound that I'm going to send into this filter? Yeah. Well, that's a question that we can answer later. First, now we need to solve another problem, which is that I have only one of these filters and I don't have two. So I need to do a trick. And the trick is that instead of demodulating these signals that come out of the filter directly, I'm going to record them in Pro Tools on 6 separate channels first. And then when I play back those channels, I don't need the filter anymore and I can use the filter for the second part of the patch. So on the first track we have the recorded voice, and the 6 tracks that you see below that will record the 6 individual outputs of the filter groups of the third octave filter. So I'm going to press record.
Hey guys, Don Jr. here. You may have seen it by now, but apparently I got the Rona. You wouldn't know it based on anything that I felt or have seen, or I guess I've been totally asymptomatic. But out of an abundance of precaution, I'll quarantine. I'll follow the regular protocols. Take it seriously. No reason to do anything otherwise. By the way, if you have any good Netflix recommendations, anything as it relates to movies or any good ebooks, since I can't go out and buy a book, but give me your thoughts, because I may have a couple days of solo time, and there's only so many guns I can clean before that gets bored. So I'll get to go through my safe, which will be fun. Do a little 2A stuff, but in the meantime, I look forward to your recommendations.
When we look at these tracks, we see that they are quite different, meaning that the variation in energy in the different frequency bands is very different. So basically what we have here is also an analysis of the voice. We can see what the content is in the lowest frequency range, in the frequency range that follows, in the mid frequencies where obviously the most energy is, and then this is the highest frequency range where only once in a while there is a little bit of articulation. So I'm going to mute the original voice, and I'm going to unmute the other tracks, and I'm going to send them to individual outputs on the patch bay. Remember that 1 until 8 go to the mixing desk and 9 until 11 go to the patch bay directly, which in this case is very convenient. So these are the direct outputs of Pro Tools, direct outputs 9 until 16, and I'm going to send them to Amplitude demodulators. And from the outputs of the Amplitude demodulators, I'm going to the Amplitude modulators, just as I've been drawing on the board. The filters are now going to the audio inputs of the Amplitude modulators. And the outputs of the Amplitude modulators go to the desk. And the last one. The outputs of the filter here have been recorded on 6 individual channels in Pro Tools. So I don't need this part of the patch anymore. When I play back Pro Tools now, I'm sending the 6 audio signals from the filter to the 6 Amplitude demodulators. And I am now using the third-octave filter here. So I need to decide still what I'm going to send to the input of the third-octave filter. Now, there are many options, of course, here, but one thing is important, which is that the sound that I'm going to send here has at least the frequency range of the filters that I have been using here, because otherwise it wouldn't make sense. If I would use a sine wave, for instance, that would be complete nonsense. So I need a broad spectrum. So I'm going to start with pink noise and see how that sounds. Okay, let's see how it sounds.
Hey guys, don't you hear? You may have seen it by now, but apparently I got the winner. You wouldn't know it based on anything that I filtered, let's see here. I guess I can totally something out. But out of an abundance of precaution, I'll quarantine. I'll follow the regular protocols and take it seriously. No reason to do anything otherwise. By the way, you have any good Netflix recommendations? Anything as it relates to movies or any good ebooks, since I can't go out and buy a book. But give me your thoughts, because I now have a couple days of solo time, and there's only so many guns I can clean before that gets bored. So I think to go through my safe, that should be fun.
Should be clear, of course, that this is not perfect vocoding. For a real vocoder, you need many more bands that I'm using here. So you would, for instance, analyze 20 individual frequency bands and also resynthesize 20 individual frequency bands. But for demonstration purposes, it's interesting to try this out at least with the 6 groups that I have used here. And I think it still sounds rather convincing. Another sound that we could use to resynthesize the voice is a low square wave. Yeah? A low square wave will give you a very recognizable result. Okay, back to Don Jr.
Hey guys, Don Jr. You may have seen it by now, but apparently I got corona. You wouldn't know it based on anything that I felt or have seen, or I guess I've been totally asymptomatic. But out of abundance of precaution, I'll quarantine. I'll follow the regular protocols, take it seriously, no reason to do anything otherwise. By the way, if you have any good Netflix recommendations, anything as it relates to movies or any good ebooks, since I can't go out and buy a book, but give me your thoughts, because, I may have a couple days of solo time, and there's only so many guns I can clean before I get bored, so, I get to go through my safe, which will be fun. Do a little two-way stuff, but in the meantime, I look forward to your recommendations.
The last sound that I'm going to use as an input for my vocoder patch is the output from the binary scaler, the BSC. There is now an 8000 Hz pulse connected to the binary scaler, and when I open the first knob I hear that sound divided by 2. So, and then the next octave. So it sounds like a very big organ because I'm hearing only octaves. And this sound I'm now going to use as an input for the vocoder patch.
Hey guys, Don Jr. You may have seen it by now, but apparently I got corona. You wouldn't know it based on anything that I felt or have seen, or I guess I've been totally asymptomatic. But out of abundance of precaution, I'll quarantine. I'll follow the regular protocols, take it seriously, no reason to do anything otherwise. By the way, if you have any good Netflix recommendations, anything as it relates to movies or any good ebooks, since I can't go out and buy a book, but give me your thoughts, because, I may have a couple days of solo time, and there's only so many guns I can clean before I get bored, so, I'll get to go through my safe, which will be fun. Do a little two-way stuff, but in the meantime, I look forward to your recommendations.
Now to bring this to a conclusion, we used the third-octave filter to split the voice in 6 frequency zones. And these 6 frequency zones were recorded on individual tracks in Pro Tools. And it is important that they stay synchronized. Although it is actually interesting to play them back unsynchronized. You can try that out for yourself if you want to. When they are played back from Pro Tools, we do not use the filter anymore, but we send the output from Pro Tools to 6 individual connections on the patch bay, and from there we go to 6 Amplitude demodulators. And then the voltages that come from these 6 Amplitude demodulators control the amplitudes on 6 amplitude modulators, and the 6 amplitude modulators then control again the levels of the outputs of the filter. And then at the input of the second filter we tried out different signals for the resynthesis part of this patch. So we used pink noise first, then I used a low square wave, and then in the last example I used this organ sound coming from the binary scaler. So take your time to try this out, and hopefully we will be able to hear your results in another session. See you in a week or so with another demonstration from Sonology Studio BEA5.